record right now, and we are recording now. I'm going to share my screen so you can see me here while I talk through the beginning here. But everybody, welcome to School 16. If it's your first time, we're excited to have you. And we always start these sessions off by having folks in the chat tell us where they're calling from, because we know that people join all over the world. We know some of you are staying up really late or waking up early to join these sessions, and we really appreciate it. So I can see Moses from Delaware. Joe here is in New York. And by the way, let us know if this is your first session too. We'd love to know that as well. And Ray is spending some time in Brasilia, which is great. We got Santiago from Chile representing, London, Cincinnati, Michigan, Tokyo. I think I've seen on this call before. Thanks for coming back. New York. I know you're hankering down right now during this pandemic, so we're with you here in solidarity. We're here in New York as well, and I see Jeremiah's in Virginia. Cool. And Francisco, welcome. It's your first session. Thank you for joining us here. And Boston, Larry from Boston. Boston has a special place in our heart as well. That's where Vadim and I grew up, actually right outside of Boston. Spent some time living in Southie. So if you've seen The Departed, that was our lives. And we got Katayun from Iran. Very cool. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. So I'm going to get started here. My name is Sergey Revzin. I'm here with my partner, Vadim Revzin. He also happens to be my twin brother and lives 3 blocks away from me here in New York City. But let me tell you a little bit about why we started School 16 in case this is your first time here and you're hearing about us and what you can expect from this session and others. We launched School 16 in the beginning of April, right? In the beginning of the pandemic that just started for one simple reason. We believe a couple core things. We think that current higher education and adult education doesn't do enough to prepare people to have entrepreneurial careers and to be able to help people get jobs and level up in their career prospects. And we want to solve that problem through School 16, through remote instruction. That's why we started offering these free sessions every Wednesday so that people can all over the world, like yourselves, can join them and learn from experts like Dave. Our instructors are all people that work at companies and tech companies, and specifically all over the world. And we've had people from Google, from Slack, from HubSpot. Dave here is from NetApp. So these are people that have run teams, that have had tremendous careers, and you're going to learn exactly from them how to navigate your career and what skills are important for you to learn. The reason why we chose technology is we believe that tech is typically the industry that bounces back the fastest, even in uncertain economic situations like ourselves. It also provides the most flexibility, where we can call in and have conversations like this remotely and still get a paycheck, still do our jobs in a lot of technology jobs. So even though every industry is going to get affected during this economic crisis, tech is going to bounce back the fastest. We've seen that happen time and time again. And Vadim and I were lucky enough to get into technology early on in our careers. We also graduated in a horrible economic situation and financial crisis. Yet getting into tech is, I think, what provided all the opportunities for us. We've switched careers many times. I've gone from finance to tech to education. The last couple of years, Vadim has been teaching as a professor at SUNY Purchase at NYU. I am on the venture capital side of things now, so went from startups to venture capital. And we want to bring you some of the things that we learned, but we want to bring it via the instruction that we provide through people that have experienced these careers. There's my dog in the back. She wanted to say hi, so Pumpkin's going to interject here meanwhile. A couple of things that I want to say before we move on here and introduce Dave. So again, these sessions have been really inspiring and amazing, and we thank people like Dave who volunteer their time. Honestly, an hour out of the day is a lot to ask for somebody who's literally getting paid to sell and bring revenue into the company. So your time is very valuable, David, and other folks that join us on these calls, and we really appreciate you offering it up to everybody that has joined us here today. I'm going to share my screen here again to support some of what I'm talking about here, but we've been doing these sessions. We're going to offer these Wednesday sessions to all of our students all over the world for free forever, because we want to give you the opportunity to learn from experts like Dave. That being said, we know that many of you want more, a little bit more. You want smaller class sizes. You want the ability to hear and learn from more experts, and you want more than just one session a week. and you want to get some experiential learning. That's something that we've found out from many of you that have filled out surveys and actually have done one-on-one calls. By the way, when you get an email from myself and from Vadim, if you reply directly, we will get that email and we want to talk to you. So if you ever want to hop on a call with us, we're always willing to talk to any students that jump on this call and offer our time, whether you just want some career advice or you want to give us feedback on how to make these better. But given all the conversations we've had in the last month or so since starting this, we've come up with a 2-month remote online program for people that really want to spend more time learning skills in product, sales, marketing, and operations. Those are our 4 core functions. We know that there are a lot of high-paying jobs in technology where you don't have to be a coder. And that's why we actually came up with this program. And so if you want to learn more about it, go to school16.co/program. We're interviewing people right now. We actually made our first offers this morning. I know there's some people on the call that probably got an offer letter today, so we're excited to have you join us. But again, if you want to learn more about it, go to school16.co/program. It's a more hands-on 2-month program, and the outcome by the end is going to be not only that you're going to develop a stronger network in technology, but you're also going to have a by the end of it. I see that there's, I'm just going to mute someone that dialed in here, but again, so that's, if you have questions about that, please let us know. We're going to ask you to fill out the survey in the end here. But without further ado, Vadim, unless I missed something, I want to make sure we have a chance to hear from David here for the remainder of the call. But again, I'm going to encourage people to use the chat if any questions come up. We do look, and we will ask those questions if we think they're relevant for the conversation. So Vadim, did I miss anything? And other than that, feel free to take it away from me.
No, that's great. Thanks, Sergey. So welcome, everybody. Thanks again. You might notice I sound exactly the same as Sergey because, as I said earlier, we're twins, and so we actually have the same voice. But I'm really excited to share and have Dave share his story and dig into his career today because he had actually a very unique path. You know, Sergey mentioned a few minutes ago that there are many careers in tech, in fact, that are very lucrative and not just coding. Sure, technical skills are helpful. And as a matter of fact, Dave started off his career as in tech support, in technical roles. And I don't want to tell too much, but he then transitioned into sales, presumably because he saw a bigger opportunity there. Fun fact, Dave is also an assistant coach for the Israel's men's indoor lacrosse team, which is pretty cool. But I don't want to talk too much here. We start off these sessions virtually the same, Dave, and that is we want to hear from you a little bit about your background and what your story is, the story of your career, and then we're going to dig into some of the questions that we have prepared, okay? So you can take it away.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Yeah, I mean, my story is pretty interesting one. I graduated from the University of Colorado in 1992 with a history degree. And I was accepted to law school at Michigan State, where I had watched Jerry Maguire probably one too many times and thought that I was going to go off and get a law degree and become a sports agent. That was my grand plan. And about 4 hours into my trip to Michigan State, where I had put my deposit down, I decided I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I had paid my way through school. I was staring at a mountain of debt. And I was about to go get into some more debt. In fact, much more debt. And I literally had a panic attack. And I'm old enough to have used a payphone. So I actually stopped my car 4 hours into my trip and called my older sister bawling. And it was like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I don't think I want to be a lawyer. I certainly don't want to get any more debt. And if I do become a lawyer, I'm going to owe a lot of money. I'm going to have to be a really shady, bad lawyer and rip people off. I don't want to do that. So after my panic attack, my sister basically said, well, why don't you go home and try to find something else to do? So I did. I turned the car around, went back home to where I was renting a room and asked if the room was still available. And luckily I had a really good friend who was, it was, 1997, at the time when I graduated. Sorry, I think I said 92, but 97 is when I graduated. And he was working for a tech company doing tech support. And this was the .com boom. This was before there was an MIS degree, an IT degree. Mainframes were still popular, punch cards, things like that. Open systems and Unix were just kind of hitting the world, and people were like, I don't know if this open systems thing's going to stick or not. But I had a buddy who was doing tech support, and I needed a job, and he asked me if I wanted to do a job doing tech support. I was a history major. I didn't really know anything about computers, and he said it's using Unix operating systems, and I said, what's a Unix? Is that something you do to a horse? What is this? So long story short, he ended up getting me an interview, and they hired me on my personality and willing to learn. And it's a sink or swim environment. They kind of threw you out there. You started answering phone calls, and it was up to you to work with a senior person to try to figure out, how to solve, the customer's problems. And this was all a Unix backup product. So I didn't sink. I actually swam, and after about 6 months, I got my feet under me and started to be able to take calls and, start to understand the technology and learn more and more. A lot of self-taught stuff, using smart people. If I've learned anything in my career, is your network is the most important thing that you have. Smart people, people in technology. Those people will help you, and they helped me in my career. So lo and behold, I spent the .com era basically job hopping and doing startup land. Once my skill set was at a level, I could leave one company and join another company for a bigger salary, and I could leave that company and join another company for a bigger salary. And that helped me from a salary standpoint, but I still wasn't really happy in what I was doing. I knew that there was something more that I could be doing. And all this time in tech support, I started interfacing with the folks that they call sales engineers. These were the technical folks who were out there selling the software products, that were calling in for help because they were in front of a customer, either doing a proof of concept or, in production. And, more and more, I started to meet these guys. And again, it's about network. These people seem like me. They seem, to have a personality, to have a want to learn. And more, I found out they made a lot more money than I did. And here I was helping them. I was way more technical than a lot of these people, but yet these were the technical people that they were putting out, in the sales teams. And lo and behold, I learned that I wanted to become a sales engineer and really become on the sales team. So I had an opportunity in 1999 to take a job as a sales engineer that was given to me. And again, it was an opportunity. And like I said, never turn down a conversation. If you're at one of these, conferences, tech conferences, on a plane, in a coffee shop, never turn down these conversations, because you never know where they're going to lead. And at the end of the day, it was a conversation that, got me out of tech support and into sales. My company had actually just been acquired by a company called Computer Associates. And we were sent down to their conference, and there I was, trying to figure out a way to become a sales engineer. And I was actually so good at tech support, they didn't want to promote me. In fact, that I was being kind of held back because I was needed. I was now a backline engineer and, critical for the support. And every time I tried to go for a promotion, it was kind of being railroaded. So we got bought by this company, and I was manning the booth and showing people, how to use the product, and decided I need a break. I went out and needed some cash. So I hit the ATM line, and there's a gentleman, in a suit behind me, and he looked like he was in a hurry, and, long line. And so sure enough, he was kind of, irritated. So I asked if he wanted to go ahead of me in line, because he seemed like he was in a hurry. So he went ahead and had a line. He turned around, he saw the logo on my shirt and said, "Hey, didn't we just acquire your company?" I said, "You did." And started getting into a conversation. Well, he ended up being the sales manager for the new company for the product, for my product that they inherited. And, after about a 30-minute conversation with this guy, he asked me if I had any intention of ever getting into sales engineering. And I said, "Well, yeah, I would love that. In fact, I've been trying to do that for years." And sure enough, we had the conversation, exchanged information. Got a call about 3 weeks later, and he said, "Hey, you're on my team. You're a sales engineer." So that was my first foray into being a sales engineer. And now here I was in a new career, and I didn't know what being a sales engineer meant. This was new territory for me. I was technical. I could install a product. I could tell you about all the features and all the things they did, but I couldn't align that to value back to the customer. The so what, right? I can tell you how fast something went, or all the different features of the product, but I couldn't relate that back. So again, I looked at the people who were successful in my field and started to attach myself to them and ride their coattails, and looked at what made them successful. And lo and behold, I spent probably almost 14 years being a sales engineer, and different levels of sales engineer. I was a principal architect. And in fact, actually a couple of my colleagues are on the call here. So they've seen my career firsthand, but that's kind of what I did for a few years. And then I got bored again. I got really good at that. And, I saw, the sales folks and the money that they were making and, the relationships that they had. And, my desire, as I get older is really to become maybe less technical. I started out my career really technical, and over time, it's hard to keep up with everything. At the bits and bytes level, that you need to do tech support, to do coding, to do app dev and stuff like that. And for me, I like my mouth. And, so I decided that, the next step for me, was actually management. So I spent some time managing solutions engineering teams. So I spent about 3 years at NetApp building teams. One of my former employees is on the phone, Jeremiah Cox, and, and building teams. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot different though, because I wasn't in front of the customer. It was more about interfacing and working with people and building their careers and understanding what they want to do. So I missed the customers, and that ultimately led me back to the sales path. That's where I've been for the last couple of years. And, I'm really enjoying the sales path. It was kind of funny when I was on the sales engineering side. I was always like, oh, those sales guys, they got it easy, man. We do all the work. We tell them about the technology. They just come in, buy coffee and, ask for an order. I've learned that is just not so much true. There's a lot of effort that goes into it. It's just a different type of work. It's really about relationship building and understanding what your customers want. And at the end of the day, customers buy from people they know, like, and trust. Whether I'm selling labels to beer cans, or I'm selling, $36 million worth of enterprise software to a customer. At the end of the day, if your customer doesn't know, like, and trust you, you're never going to sell them anything. So it's really about building your brand. We had a CEO at my company, Tom Mendoza, who was one of the founders of NetApp. If you ever went to Notre Dame, the College of Business is called the Tom Mendoza College of Business. So he's done okay in his life. But the one thing he told me that never left me is everybody's in sales. Whether you're technical support engineer, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in DevOps and you're coding, everybody's selling, and you're selling all the time. You're selling yourself, and you're selling your company at all the times. So whatever your title says, you're also in sales. So I'll stop there. And any questions, comments on the career path and kind of how I got to where I was today?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I actually also went into sales engineering relatively early in my tech career, and I got my first sales engineering gig when I wasn't that technical. I mean, I took computer science in high school, but that's about it. But I had worked with an early stage startup in pure sales, SMB sales. And what I did to get that sales engineering role is I talked to them about how closely I interfaced with the CTO of the company, because it was a 6-person startup, and how quickly I was able to pick up different technologies. And the particular company that I was speaking with was open to bringing on somebody that wasn't terribly technical, that they could train up on that, but knew how to run a meeting, because it had just so happened that their VP of sales that was at that time running all their meetings was not technical at all. So I was technical compared to him. And you're right. I mean, you are absolutely selling yourself. You sold yourself early on when you got the tech support role and you didn't have any tech experience. And then you sold yourself to get more of a client-facing role as a sales engineer. And for people that have not heard of that term, sales engineering, it's actually a pretty cool job, because for a lot of positions and a lot of companies, it's not a quota-carrying job. In other words, you get an awesome salary, but the salesperson is still responsible for closing the deal. And you literally get brought on as an expert into these meetings. But of course, that's structured a little bit differently in different places. But sales engineering is essentially what it sounds like. It's the technical person in the meeting that is helping close the deal, that is helping get the technical stakeholders committed to buy into the product or service that's being sold.
Yeah, I always explain, when somebody says, "What's a sales engineer?" I'm the guy that's, who basically translate geek to value and money. And one of the things I learned early on is that, if you can translate a feature or function into dollars and cents into an ROI, that's how you're going to capture, the conversation. The sales engineer's job is really to get, the technical team spun up and excited about the technology, to a point where when the salesperson goes to ask for the money, ultimately they're going to come back to the tech team and says, does this work? Is this something you want? That sales engineer is really responsible for making sure that technical team says, yes, this is something that's going to work. We've tested it, and this is what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in an enterprise sale, in a very complex, long sales cycle, you have multiple stakeholders and influencers within the company that basically help decide if the company's going to invest. You mentioned $36 million. That deal takes a long time to close. That doesn't happen in a week or two. But also, it comes with pretty high commissions as well, which is part of what makes sales lucrative. Sergey, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Before I ask my next question, one of the things you said, Dave, is that the sales engineers were making more money than you, even though you were more of the tech guy. Can you give us like a range of how much money sales engineers make? I know it's a range, but I think that'd be interesting for people to hear on this call.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I started off pretty early, so the salary ranges have changed a little bit. But as a tech support person, I was making, probably about 75K with bonuses and shift differentials and things of that K, and that was really the max that you could earn. When I moved over to sales engineering, I bumped my salary to just under 100K when I started, but I did get commission. So I was part of the commission. So most sales engineers, if they are quota carrying, work on 70% salary, about 30% commission. Sometimes that varies, all the way up to about 75-25. So about 25 of my salary was also coming from commission, which you could overachieve on. So I went from making about 75K a year to about 130K a year in my first year as a sales engineer because of that commission. So it was significant, and the chance to overachieve. And when you're aligned with a good rep, you really can overachieve. And as you mentioned, the rep really carries a lot of the risk. I worked for a company called EMC that was kind of famous in the day for, churning and burning reps. You had 6 months to make your quota. If you didn't, thank you, see you later. We got the next guy ready to roll. But as a sales engineer, and I was a sales engineer at that company for, I think in a single year, I think I went through 4 different reps. So there's a lot more stability on that sales engineering side, especially if you're kind of dipping your toes in that sales world. And it's also a real good place to learn, what a good salesperson is and what a bad salesperson is. Because I've been aligned to both. And your success is typically tied to another person. So whether you're that salesperson, you're a sales engineer, you're typically tied to another person, and that your success is tied to that person. So it can make for some interesting dynamics in relationships. So.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot for that context. And, actually, I see that Ray asked the question about it, whether it's enough to understand the technology, the software, and the product, or do you need to be a trained engineer? I'm going to answer that really quickly, just in the interest of time, in that not necessarily. You don't have to be as technical as an engineer, but you have to deeply understand the engineer's job, and you need to be curious enough about it. So people go from technical roles to sales engineering, and also people go from more business focused roles to sales engineering. But either way, you really have to be a product expert and know it inside out. If you want to add to that, feel free, Dave. But I also want to ask a question that you touched on, which is, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that your network is one of the most important determinants of your career. I think for a lot of people, networking makes some conceptual sense, but it's difficult to execute on. And so do you have any advice and maybe specific stories about how you leveraged your network to improve your career opportunities? And how do you do that in a way that's not awkward, that's authentic, that doesn't come off as, hey, you didn't talk to this person for years, and now that you need something, you're reaching out to them. That might not be the best way. So any input there on how to leverage your network in the best way?
Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is, when I started this job, we didn't have things like LinkedIn and social networks and stuff like that, which, made it even harder, which meant you had to pick up the phone. You really had to be disciplined and pick up the phone and talk to people and talk to them on a recurring basis. Like you said, you can't just show up every couple of years and say, hey, how you doing? I need something. So for me, it's developing, it's kind of a priority list, and it's not like you're picking your friends and stuff like that, but, you look at, the people, and, where they're at in their careers. And I kind of prioritize, what are the most important relationships as far as my career is concerned. And I make it a poignant effort to, reach out to people. Everybody's got an ego. It feels good, when somebody comes and asks you for advice, right? And so that's a lot of the way that I did it, is, didn't come across as wanting something, I need you to get me a job, really coming across as I want advice. And you'll find that people have different areas of expertise. You want to understand what those different areas of expertise, and, you'll find that they like to talk about that. And the more you can get them talking, the easier it is to have those relationships. There's the old, like, like you say, you don't want it to seem forced, right? You see the bad sales guys. They'll walk into a sales call. They'll, if they're in the person's office, they'll see a picture of, the kid, or the dog or the wife. And it's like, oh, dogs. Yeah. Oh, so you got a dog there. Like, that stuff's forced and faked, right? You really have to be genuine. And one of the questions was, what makes a good, sales engineer is you got to have a personality. I have a friend, and Jeremiah, you know this person, who works with us. He's an amazingly smart technical person. He's got a PhD, he's got an MBA. And he's very technical, and he's worked very hard on his personality, because he's got the technical piece down. He can answer any technical question, anything, but he's worked more on his personality and stuff like that. And he recently also made the transition from sales engineering to sales, and he's out there killing it. But if you talk to him, he's actually worked on his personality, right? He's recorded himself doing demos. He's recorded himself talking to customers, and sees where he comes off stuck and stuff like that. So, he's really spent some time on that. So these are things that you can improve, but a lot of this is just a natural ability to want to connect with customers. So, maybe a little long-winded there. So hopefully I answered the question somewhere up there. So.
No, that's really good. I agree with you. I mean, look, as a sales engineer, you do have to be more technical, but they're not going to trust you with an important client unless they think you would do well in that room. That's just how it is. And I remember my first time feeling that the company that had me as a sales engineer, that they believed in me sending me into these meetings is when they would send me without the VP of sales to meet with the C-suite, for like major publishers, which were our clients that we were pitching. And I knew that not only were my technical skills up to par, but also that I could probably do well with running the sales process. So I'm curious though, I mean, you came in from a little bit more of a technical role, and that makes sense to me how that would feed into sales engineering. I came in from a completely non-technical role, and I got a gig as a sales engineer. What have you seen in your career? Are people usually coming in from more engineering roles into SE, or have you seen a lot of salespeople that just figured out product, clearly were more interested in becoming more technical, becoming product specialists, and then decided to transition into sales engineering?
Yeah, I've seen kind of both ends. And in fact, we've seen a lot of customers, people who were working in operations and customer in operations, or, working for, particular customers, that had some technical skills, or had worked with a certain product or worked with a certain vendor, attach themselves to that vendor, and start to, really understand, that vendor and that product, and use that as a way to get into sales engineering with a particular vendor. And I've seen people do that from the operations side, and I've seen people do that from the business side, where, if you're already employed, at a customer, and maybe you're in a role where you interface with vendors and stuff like that, really getting to understand your vendors and stuff like that, helps you, because these are the guys, again, that will make up your network. We've pulled plenty of customers, into sales engineering's role and into sales roles, because one, their customer, they understand how customers buy, they understand customer problems. So there's lots of different ways that you can get into it. And, we've hired folks from different careers, outside of non-technical careers, people who have been, out there, selling, pharmaceuticals, medical supply devices and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, sales is sales. You know, and the other thing is, you know, there's so many ways to get enabled today. Coursera, A Cloud Guru. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can go out there today. All the cloud providers provide training, free training, certifications that will get you involved in tech. But you know, at the end of the day, it's starting to understand what vendors are out there and aligning yourselves to them, and starting to know people at those companies. But you know, really, it kind of goes back to, you know, who you know. You know, it's so hard to get your job, your resume past the computers these days.
Yo la estaba buscando.
So you really have to, you know, do some research. You know, I have a somebody who just came to me, you know, hit me up on LinkedIn, and you know, was looking for a job at NetApp in sales engineering, and I'm not sure how he got to me, but you know, I was impressed that he got to me. And you know, when you do get to somebody, it's a sales campaign. You're selling yourself. You know, but you really, you know, I kind of keep going back to the network, but the network is so key these days. You know, otherwise you just got to have a resume that has all the right keywords to get picked up, you know, through that by that computer. So, but you know, I do a lot of education outside of you know, my job. You know, I started in Unix open systems and backup. You know, and you know, now, you know, we're selling SaaS, DevOps, and native cloud solutions. And so, you know, I've had to spend the last 3 years, you know, getting smart on cloud. So, you know, and I've had to do that on my own. There's nobody that's going to do that for you. And Jeremiah that Cox is actually on the phone, is one of the people that really helped me get, you know, enabled on the cloud side. So,
That's awesome.
you know, again, using my my network. So Jeremiah's a smart guy. I attached myself to him. So.
That's great. And you know, actually, and thanks, Jeremiah, by the way, for jumping in and answering some of those questions. This is a recurring theme here. We had a gentleman named Isaac last week who talked about how he learns new things in a new job. He finds people in the job who are good at it. He asks them for help. And another thing that you mentioned, not to be dismissed, is that if you are looking for a new job, if you were a customer of someone else, that's a fantastic way to try to get leads for opportunities, because again, that's a relationship you had, even though you were the customer. You know, they appreciate that you were the customer, and they might want to do you a solid by getting you an interview at their company, and they know that you already understand what they do. And so it's a much easier ask to make. I wanted to ask you, Dave, just to switch gears a little bit, you know, in your current role, can you give people an idea of what a typical day looks like? You know, you get in the office, and I think it'd be cool to hear, you know, what is it that you do? How do you prioritize your time and the like?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm in a unique role at my company. You know, I've been working in the service provider space for quite some time, and this is the traditional service provider space, the IBM Global Services of the world, you know, DXC, you know, Accenture, some of the more traditional, you know, outsourcers. And you know, so my job is, you know, I'm a farmer. I really have a couple of accounts, and you know, my job is to, you know, continue to work the account. Our customer, the customers that I manage own our product, and are using our product, and it's my job to get them to continue to use the product and to expand their use of the product. And so what that means is, my first job of the day is you know, working with my sales engineer to understand, is my customer happy? Because that's the first thing. If my customer's not happy, they're not getting value out of my product, I can't sell them anything else. So a lot of my job as a farmer is making sure that my customer is happy. And that's, for a lot of it, it's doing PM type work, is you know, organizing a weekly call with my customer where we go through all their support issues. We go for all their requests for enhancements. We prioritize the requests for enhancements. And what that gives me back, you know, it's always you have a famous you know, sales leader says, value for value, right? If I'm giving something, I got to get something back. So what I'm giving them is great customer service and you know, value for my product. What I get back is access. What I get back is access to the account. So a lot of my time is spent mapping out the different business areas, because the accounts that I work with are you know, over 100,000 employees and over you know, 10 billion in revenue. So pretty large organizations, which means there's a lot of different facets that I have to work in that organization. So it's really working the organization and understanding where the different projects are that are going to grow my specific product revenue. So I spend a lot of my time, working with the people I know in the account to get introduced to people I don't know in the account. And this account, that may be, they have regional CTOs. So each region has their own CTO, and each account that they have, major account that they have, has their own account CTO. So a lot of my time is working with the regional CTOs to get introductions to the account CTOs that don't own my product, and learning about what they're doing at their accounts so that I can give them an introduction to my product. Because what these guys don't want is me calling and saying, hey, I've got something that's going to solve your problems. They get 100 phone calls a day like that. So a lot of my time is really asking them questions about their business, where they need help, where things are working, where things aren't working. So it's a lot of conversations. And through those conversations, I get access to projects, that are, strategic. I get access to, who owns those projects and where the money is with those projects. And, it's really a follow the money train. So, I mean, that's really, my day-to-day life is, keeping my customer happy. And what that gives me is the ability to continue to sell to that customer and get access to people that, typically didn't want to talk to me. There's a lot of folks that don't want to talk to you until you've proven yourself, valuable to that company. And that's why I say you can't just show up and say, hey, I got a product for you. You really have to understand each customer's business and each of these CTOs, what's driving them. And then you need to come back and align your product to those initiatives. They'll give you the roadmap, but you got to get that roadmap out of them. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I'm also curious kind of as you were talking here, because, one of the unique things with an enterprise sales role is oftentimes you're working with a book of business. In other words, you're taking existing clients or companies that are already spending money with you, and you're finding upsell opportunities or ways to expand the deal versus finding new deals, which obviously a lot of sales roles are. So can you talk about how that's split for you in your capacity? Is it mainly, I mean, you mentioned the farmer analogy, right? So is it mainly working with an existing book of business, or are you doing any hunting as well?
Yeah, I mean, mainly I'm working with an existing book of business. Now, we do have a bunch of folks in our organization that do the hunting, and they usually come in two flavors. One of the easiest places to break into sales is inside sales. And this is a role where you start out on the phone. You may not even have to be technical. It's a great job for recent college graduates, people looking to make a change in industry and stuff like that. I've seen people break into inside sales late into their careers and stuff like that. But that's really where you're working off leads. And those tend to be marketing generated leads. And most of the time they're pretty bad leads. Somebody showed up to, a conference and they wanted the plush squeaky toy that we were giving out. So they let us scan their badge. And, they really had no interest in talking to us whatsoever. They just wanted whatever swag we were giving away at the booth that day. But it's a great job to cut your teeth and start to learn how to have conversations with customers and really, start to understand, how, to get a customer interested in something. And their job really is to generate a lead. And then they hand that lead off to an outside sales rep who's a hunter, right? And they call it a sales qualified lead at that point. In other words, somebody has talked to this person, they've identified a need, they may have even identified a product, and now they hand that off to an outside person who's going to go and actually make an introduction to the customer and find out more about their business. So those are the two different types of sales roles, which is, once you kind of become more senior, you tend to get bigger accounts in your farming. When you're young and cutting your teeth, you tend to hunt. So a lot of my early sales engineering roles were paired up with hunters, right? Where we were taking sales qualified leads and trying to turn them into sales opportunities where the customer had no budget. They'd never heard of our product. We didn't even know if they necessarily needed our product, but they had talked to, an inside salesperson long enough to take an appointment, and get us on site. Those are kind of some of the different types of, sales roles that you have. Personally, being more senior in my career, I prefer the farming aspect because I get to develop deep, customer relationships, and I get to provide value to the customer. And when I do provide value, I get to tell them all about it and get them to spend more money with me. So.
Interesting. And I wanted to touch on a few of the questions that came in from Dimitri and Ray. For an enterprise level role like this, especially one with customers that write big checks, oftentimes you have to check in person. People need that. It's how you establish trust. I think you mentioned trust earlier as a factor for purchasing decisions. But how do you think that's going to change for you in the next, let's say, year or so, or the foreseeable future, as clearly more business is going to be done remotely? Do you think you'll be able to be as successful in your role if now you can't hop on a plane and go visit a customer and everything has to be done over the phone?
Yeah, it's going to make things a lot more challenging. I mean, because the other part of the role that we didn't talk about, and this is the fun part of the role, right? This is the part of the role that, you see in the movies and stuff like that is, as a sales rep, you do get to entertain customers. And that means taking customers out to dinner. That means maybe taking customers to a sporting event, taking customer bowling, whatever, they want to do. Luckily, I work for a company like NetApp where we don't take customers to strip clubs and we don't do that Wolf of Wall Street stuff. We're very above board company, but it's going to make it a lot harder because a lot of selling occurs when you're not selling. When you are out to dinner and you're talking about the kids and you're talking about what you did that weekend and the customer's interest and stuff like that. Because like I said, it goes back to customers buying from people they know, like, and trust. And if you can't meet a customer face to face, how are you going to do that? So it does make it more challenging. So you've got to be more creative. And that means maybe you can't take a customer out to dinner, but maybe you can, order the customer, a Grubhub meal and share a meal or share a drink with them online. What I have found is customers are more accessible, because they're not constantly being entertained by vendors. Customers are more accessible today. So there are some pros to this as well. I have been able to get more people on the phone, first call, first email in the last 2 months than I have in the last 2 years combined. People are home. People are waiting around to get on the phone with the vendors. They don't have to talk to the wife and kids. So from that standpoint, customers have become more accessible, but the personal touch is gone. So it is going to become a challenge. And to be honest, I don't have an answer to that question. I think it's a wait and see type of situation. I'm glad I'm farming right now and not hunting because I have some of those established relationships. Even when I'm introduced to somebody new in the account, I know somebody they know in the account and they're vouching for me. So it's easier to build that rapport quicker, when you're farming, but it is going to be a challenge, for the inside folks who are trying to break into accounts and the hunter outside sales reps, that are trying to, break in. And I think social selling is going to become much more important. We've been doing a lot of training on social selling. I like to call it social stalking. When you see a customer, get to their LinkedIn page. Mo, you did a great job of stalking me. Thank you. So, get on there. Find them on Facebook. Find them on LinkedIn. Find them on Pinterest or wherever they may be. Understand what makes them tick. And it can't be contrived, but in the back of the head, you want to know what makes that person go. And you don't want to make it so obvious, but understanding what makes them go makes it easier to connect to that person. So I think you're going to have to get much better at the social selling aspect in this new world and getting connected to customers and finding where they are socially on the net and kind of what makes them go. User groups are another great place to meet people. There's a lot of user groups. School16, right? This is another great place. You're meeting people now, right? There's people on the line right now that you can connect to, and you all have a common interest. So it's going to get harder, and I think it's a wait and see situation. But we're going to have to get better at the social network and the social selling aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're right. You mentioned the network several times. There are people on this call. We are a group. Anybody that reaches out to me and Sergey, we're always responsive. We're going to have a woman that's going to be leading a session from Twitter. Literally, the only way I met her was because I attended another Zoom call that she was on, and then I emailed her. Cold. I mean, warm-ish, but still cold. And then we were connected through a mutual entrepreneur. So these connections are incredibly important to folks. And by the way, folks, I know, Sergey, I think you have another question coming up, but we have about 12, 13 minutes left here. We might go a few minutes over if Dave, if you have a few extra minutes here. Yeah. But feel free to start dropping your questions if you have any burning questions that are coming up. But Sergey, did you want to comment on something?
Yeah, I want to comment and then ask a follow-up question. My one comment is, I know that if you're on the call and you're interested in sales and you don't really know where to start. I see people asking questions about inside sales versus outside sales. These are all sort of things you can research by looking at different jobs, but it really does depend on the product that you're selling, the size of the deals that you're looking at here. Like if you're NetApp and you're selling like a $32 million deal, let's say, that Dave talked about earlier, that's probably going to require some face time with the CEO, right? Or the C-suite, the C-level people at a company that are buying it, if they're making such a big budget decision. That's an outside sale that's going to require a lot of people on your team, sales engineers, et cetera. There are other types of sales jobs out there that are all inside sales, all calling or sending emails from your office or from your room if you're doing it remotely. And a lot of those jobs are, they're deals, you're selling deals, anything less than $100,000 oftentimes can be made, the decision can be made remotely. If it's even smaller, then the decision can be made sometimes even without even jumping on a call, just doing emails. So there's a lot of different types of sales jobs, and you can do the research to find out what makes sense for you. But I want to ask a question, Dave, because I know that given your industry experience, being in the industry for 20 plus years and jumping from different roles, you've also hired a lot of people. And, I want to speak to maybe some of your experiences in hiring people that maybe weren't obvious for the role. Maybe they came from a different industry. Maybe they didn't have that much experience in the industry, but you hired them anyway. What is it about that person or those people that stood out in the process? And, even if they didn't have experience, can you tell us some stories about why you ended up hiring that person? That could be good takeaways for the audience here.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I hired a gentleman. One of my last hires was somebody who was outside of the storage arena, was actually a DevOps guy, and actually ended up being really timely when I hired him because we started getting into DevOps. But we didn't know that at the time. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is, have you been successful? Have you been successful in what you've endeavored in? And whether that's athletics, you were an accomplished athlete. Maybe you were in another role where you were highly successful in that role and you won lots of awards, but, have you been successful in previous roles? That's the first thing I'm looking for. Because if you haven't been successful in previous roles, it's kind of hard to make a case that you're going to be, successful in this role. And personality. I really look at personality. It's hard to judge personality over, Skype and stuff like that. But, how a person speaks, how a person carries themselves, how they answer questions, how they follow up. I mean, these are all things that, you can do. Just being really clear, I love when, I ask somebody a question, they answer my question, they follow up. Did I answer your question? Checking back in with me, that I answered the question. Because sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And you want to make sure that you answer the customer question, because that's a real thing. Like a lot of times I'll ask people a question in an interview and they'll go off, start answering the question, and they'll just kind of go off and trail. And all of us do this. We've all done this in our life, but it's a good thing just to kind of practice. Did I answer your question? Did the person follow up with me with a thank you email? Did the person try to close me? I'm a big fan of the trial close. At the end of every interview I've ever interviewed for, Mr. Interviewer, how did I do? Given the current role, do you see that my skills are a fit for this role? I'm not asking you to make a decision. I'm just asking you, would I fit for this role, right? So those are the types of things I'm looking for, the skills that translate, whether you're good at storage or you know what you're talking about, you're coming from another industry. It's the soft skills, right, that you got to get good at. And that's typically the stuff that keys me into a viable candidate versus a non-viable candidate. So.
Interesting. Very good point. A few great questions came in. I'll start with Leanne's and then we'll hit on yours, Ray. But it's a good question. So Leanne asked, how can a mid-career nonprofit professional, so mid-career is the key word here, who already does sales, manages contracts and sells services to other organizations, how can they transition into enterprise sales, a sales engineer at the same level? Or when you're making that switch, does that mean you essentially have to get demoted? Have you seen that happen, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that always requires how good are your negotiating skills. But at the end of the day, I mean, you've got a lot to offer, right? You're already doing, some of these things, right? So you're selling contracts, you're selling services, selling hardware, selling software. It doesn't matter. You're selling, right? And you have to, help the employer, the potential employer, understand that, those skills translate, and relaying them to, the role that you're coming into, because they do translate. But it's up to you to kind of make that connection, for that employer. So that's kind of my industry there. I mean, as far as, starting at an intro level, it really just depends. And again, some of that kind of comes back to your negotiating skills. You're obviously not going to be able to walk into a senior principal type of role, right? But coming into a system engineering, a solutions engineering, or even a virtual SE role or an inside sales role, those are all viable things. And at the end of the day, you're making a salary. It's up to you. I mean, the first thing any manager is going to ask you, what are you making today? And that's gonna be a qualifying question. If you're making $250,000 a year and you want to get into an entry level, systems engineering job making $250,000 a year, probably not going to happen. You're probably gonna have to take a salary cut, till you work your way back up to that. So I don't know if that answers your question. So.
Yeah, I like that actually. And, also it depends, right? So Leanne, if you have management experience, for example, maybe you can leverage that to get your foot in the door with a company. So if you have other things that are transferable immediately, maybe you can get your foot in the door with a company with a role that's not ideal and not perfect, not what you want right now, but it will be your transition into the next role. And again, it kind of goes back to relationships, right? If you've been meeting people that are doing enterprise sales, somebody might be likely to give you a shot. I did want to make sure to ask Ray's question, and then we'll try to be quick here so we can.
I think I saw that one. Yeah.
For Haas question. Yeah, did you see that one?
The what if your product sucks question?
Yeah.
Get a new job. No, it's tough, right? I've sold products that haven't worked in the past, and it's a tough place to be, honestly, because you are as good as your name in this industry, and it's a tough place to be, and you've got to try to find a way to make it right with the customer. And if nothing else, you've got to try to find a way to make it right with your relationship with the customer. I've actually quit a company over product quality. I was working for an early phase startup that paid me a lot of money to come on board, and lo and behold, I found out their product was about half developed, and they were installing it in customer sites, and trying to charge customers for using it, because they left the trial running and stuff like that. It was shady, and I had to make a decision. Is my name worth it? Because I want to go back and sell to some of these customers again. If I sell them something that doesn't work, yeah, they're mad at the company, but it's your face associated with it. So it's a really tough situation to be in. So you've got to find a way to make it right with the customer. And that may be, cutting and running on the product, and maybe, giving them a credit towards other products, in your company. It may be, offering them services and free services to get them what they need. Or it may be, making a decision that it is a career change. And I hate to say that, but, at the end of the day, integrity is everything. And I have a lot of problems selling a product that I know doesn't work. And you got to make some hard decisions there, because if you, a lot of people can get the first sale. I always joke, getting that second sale, much harder.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it's always a balance that, there's a lot of great startup companies here, and every startup has to sell the product for the first time to someone, right? And so oftentimes that product is not finished until you have a little bit of funding, you have some revenue. So hopefully you have the kind of team that prioritizes customer service, that fixes bugs very quickly, that rolls out new features quickly, offers discounts where need be. And if you have that kind of team that is customer centric, then you can overcome most bugs or temporary bad product situations, because hopefully your product is really, really good at this other thing, right? This innovative thing that the customer is really going to like. But it is a balance, especially with earlier stage companies. I want to ask a Haas question because I think it's interesting, and I think that might be the last question we can answer tonight. I see, Henry, your question about what you need to start a new business. I'm going to tell you, anyone here on the call that wants to be an entrepreneur and you haven't done a sales job, go get a sales job. You're going to learn so much about what we talked about here, which is the importance of providing value to customers, communicating that value to them, and really, in the end of the day, solving their problem. And that's what an entrepreneur needs to do as well. But Henry, if you want to email us, we can answer some of your questions. We help a lot of founders who want to start companies. Just our first names at school16.co. But I want to ask Ha's question, which is, how does learning the process of understanding a tech product inside out actually happen? Is this something that's a formal thing on the job, formal training, or are you doing it yourself, kind of informally?
Yeah, so this one varies all over the board. I'll rely to Jeremiah. The core NetApp products, when you come on board, there's a curriculum to get you up to speed. You take this class, you take that class, and you come out and you know everything. When you go for a startup, that's probably not going to be the case. So it's going to vary. It's a great interview question, huh? It's one of those things I ask in an interview, and I love when somebody asks me in an interview, what is the training path? How do I get up to speed on your product and stuff like that? And you always get some interesting answers. But a lot of it is on you. At the end of the day, even in those companies that do have strict curriculums and stuff like that to get you on board, a lot of it is on you. And that's where identifying the successful people in your business, your successful colleagues, is really going to help. When I brought a new person on board, I assigned them a mentor. And when I was an SE, and a mentor, I would make myself available to the new people as much as they want, but I put the onus on that new person. I'm not going to come chase you down to train you. You got to come to me. So be a pest. Find those people that are smart and attach yourselves to them. Be a pest. Buy them alcohol, food, whatever keeps them happy. But bribery goes a long, long way in this business. I've got a gentleman who has pulled my butt out of the fire many, many times. He's a giant Bruins fan and loves port. He gets many Bruins tickets and bottles of port. You got to, and again, that goes to developing that relationship, right? When I call this guy and he sees my number, he picks up right away, right? So hopefully I answered your question there, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. I'm going to squeeze in one last question from Estefania, which is, how do you sell a product that maybe the customer is not going to see immediate benefit from that product? They want to see results immediately, but they're going to benefit from it in the future, but maybe not right now. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that comes to expectation setting, and making the customer understand, the expectations and when the expectation and time to value is, and helping them, with baby steps, right? While there may not be a huge value immediately, there's probably some initial value that is there. Maybe it's not quantifiable or something like that. So, understanding and taking customer, creating a plan to that value. You're setting the proper expectations. And then it's really important then to meet those expectations, right? If you tell the customer the ROI is a 2-year ROI, you better be able to meet that expectation. If it's a 1-year ROI, you better tell them how to meet that. So a lot of that for me is really just expectation setting with the customer, and not mis-setting expectations, because you really only kind of get one chance to set those expectations with the customer. A lot of it is selling the value of your company. Why are you going to choose us? Why can you trust us? And then, setting the proper expectation to value and then delivering on that expectation. And then more importantly, have a plan to review that value. So with a lot of my customers, at the end of the year, we set targets and goals on value and things that they're going to see. And then we go back and we make sure that we met those things. And if we didn't meet them, we try to figure out why we didn't meet them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but a lot of it comes around expectation setting, and then selling the value of your company, and getting them to trust that you're going to get there. Because you're kind of asking the customer to come along for a ride with you. So they really got to be able to trust you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer, Dave, and I think that's a good place to close the conversation. So many great tips here. By the way, folks, I want to reiterate that if you want to have this recording and previous one, and we're actually going to have professional notes that we're going to have that we're going to share with folks as well, please do fill out the survey. Vadim just dropped the link in the chat. I'm showing it right here as well, school16.co/survey. It takes a minute, but you're going to get the recording of this session and notes as well. Dave, I want to thank you so much for your time again, for sharing your wisdom. You had a tremendous experience and a lot of different roles as well, which I think is always awesome to hear from. And we love hearing from people that are in the industry like yourselves. And I also want to mention that again, we're doing these weekly sessions. We have different folks like Dave come in from different types of jobs and companies. But if you want to join a more formal program or be considered for that program with a smaller class size, we're going to get to interact closer with people like Dave. And Dave, maybe we'll ask you to join our sales vertical as an instructor. We have instructors committed from Oracle, from HubSpot, from some other really great companies right now for that summer program. We have an initial deadline coming up on May 15th, so you should apply if you want to get a chance to do an interview. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. That's just school16.co/program. Once again, thank you folks for joining us here today remotely. We really appreciate it. And Dave, thanks so much for your time and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time out of your day to listen to me. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Good luck in your careers, everybody.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Cheers. All right. Thank you all. I still see some messages coming through here. We're still on here. We're going to be the last ones here, but we appreciate all of you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. And I'm going to end the call now. Thank you all. See you next week.
Have a good one, folks.
Bye-bye.